Hey! So, this is a video about modular analog synthesizers. So I played synthesizers in several bands 50 years ago now. A lot of the gear I had was digital, meaning computer generated sound, and the idea of needing any gear was soon to die with the advent of computer based systems on laptops. I was fascinated by the idea of making new sounds using analog electronics, so I decided to build my own. I studied the best synth designs and came up with my dream machine, which I built from commercially available and homemade printed circuit boards, which I populated and soldered up with components and then interfaced with the potentiometers and sockets. As you'll see shortly, you configure the sounds using patch cables, wiring up the signal chain yourself, which is fun for experimenting, but of course not hugely practical on stage. The key thing is that all the sound comes from the curious oscillations of voltages in transistors and op-amps, which are charging and discharging via capacitors, resistors and diodes. Whereas these days we use a computer to play a recorded wave or calculate new waves, the sound from this baby is pure analog. So I built the box, including the bright orange panel and some of the screen printed panels I could buy, but the rest I botched. It's a complex beast comprising the guts of a famous 1980s synth used for acid house music called a 303 and a set of modules by a DIY company called Paia and a few of my homebrew sound manglers. It took me almost a year, and by the time I was done, my bands had folded and I was playing drums in a punk band. I've got a MIDI keyboard here. This is a keyboard that doesn't make any sounds itself. It doesn't have any sound sources whatsoever. It just transmits note data, and I've got it plugged into this Paia MIDI to control voltage converter, so the note data gets turned into different types of voltage signals for triggering and setting the pitch of the analog synthesizers. I've got the output of the Paia routed to a little mixing desk so that we can get it on the speaker. Right, so this socket outputs the pitch. It's just a control voltage that goes into the voltage controlled oscillator, setting the pitch of the oscillator. There's two oscillators here. I'll just plug one of them in, and let's choose a sawtooth as an output from the oscillator, and we'll plug that over here into this voltage controlled attenuator, which then outputs the sound to the mixing desk. The voltage controlled attenuator needs to be triggered, so it needs a gate to allow the oscillator signal to play. So there's a gate which comes from the MIDI. The keyboard gets turned into a voltage, and I plug it into the gate of the voltage controlled attenuator here. And then, in principle, we should be able to hear a sawtooth wave. So that's the sawtooth wave. Okay, so those sounds are a bit rubbish really, not very musical, not very interesting, but if we add the second oscillator, we can thicken up the sound a bit. So let's see what that sounds like. I've just patched it in and change the pitch of the oscillator. Now it's much thicker. Okay, magic ingredient of a synth sound is the filter. So if we take out the output of our sound so far and we run it into our voltage controlled filter, and then put the low pass filter back into the mixer, and we should have a that's the effect of a filter on the sound. Okay, things get a little bit more funky if we add the second filter. There's two filters, there's loads of options, high pass, low pass, but let's gang up two low pass filters together, and actually that's a high pass, sorry, there's low pass. And in case you're wondering what this little unit at the bottom is here, this is a standard studio delay effects module. So we can turn on the mixing desk our delay effect up and things get pretty spacey. Another patch, just disconnected second oscillator from the sound source, and instead I'm using it to modulate the amplitude of the first oscillator, which gives you some weird effects. So the Paia module is really cool for experimenting with, but it sounds a little bit weak in comparison with this module here, this TB3031, which I've now got patched in, pitch, velocity and gating, and the keyboard will now play the 3031. Patching and the technology and the electronics, it's all a bit complicated and abstract, but the point of these things is really to make music and have a good time. This little orange box here is a sequencer, so we can plug the orange box into the synthesizers. It's actually able to control all of these synthesizers, and it'll play back phrases and melodies on them, just like an old steam organ or a pianola, which operated on punch paper. So this is a little box that can control the synthesizers, and I've got it controlling the 3031, and it's just playing a little arpeggio. Maybe we can add a little bit of delay. How about that's pretty much the video. It's been amusing getting these out again. It's been probably 7 or 8 years since I had this working, and 10 or 15 since I played any of these. One of the reasons why I got them out was these silly name your favourite most inspirational albums on Facebook things, and I thought I would do a cover of one of the techno albums that really inspired me when I was a teenager, me being a bit of a techno head as a teenager and now not being. So I've got all my teenage techno gear on, and I've had a go at programming a cover of that LP. And first we'll have the Paia coming in with a little bass line. That's it. The bass line is the Paia. A little bit unruly, not always staying in tune, not to worry. Let's have some hi-hats. And we've got this little Moog synthesizer here, which is a really nice, well-made analog synthesizer.